Chapter 4 Modes of Operating Basic Attitudes. The only way to discover the limits of the possible is to go beyond them into the impossible. Arthur C. Clarke. One of the most powerful ways that categorization affects us is the way we think about our activities, the things that we do. When solving a problem, it makes a huge difference whether we think of wrestling with it or dancing with it, attacking it or thinking of it as challenging. Categorizing it in one way can make any process difficult, unpleasant, and arduous, while another description can make it an exciting adventure. Wouldn't you like to be able to choose your mode of operating in the world? Cognitive quantifiers. Happily, John McWhorter has described a fascinating and subtle example of how our minds can be preset to respond in a particular way that sadly others have not previously noticed. A cognitive quantifier is a commentary adverb appearing at the beginning of a sentence or phrase that refers to an emotional or cognitive state, such as words happily and sadly in the previous sentence. A cognitive qualifier categorizes the sentence and prepares the mind to respond in a specified way to the scope of the experience indicated by the words that follow. To experience this effect now, think of an ordinary sentence that describes a simple scope of experience, like the green tree is standing in the sunlight, or I am holding this book in my hand. Imagine saying this sentence to yourself with your eyes closed and then pause to notice your experience of this as a baseline experience to compare with the alternatives below. Now imagine saying the exact same sentence but preceded by the word sadly. Sadly, I am holding this book in my hand. Again, with your eyes closed, and notice how this changes your experience. Then say the same sentence, but preceded by the word happily. Instead, happily, I am holding this book in my hand. And again, with your eyes closed, pay attention to your experience. Cognitive quantifiers direct your mind to think of an experience in a way that is specified by the kind of qualifier used. Imagine what your life would be like if you began every sentence and every internal thought with the word sadly or regrettably. That is very effective. That is a very effective way to be depressed, and some people actually do this. In contrast, imagine what your life would be like if every sentence and thought was preceded by the word luckily or fortunately. That would be a much more useful choice, and again, some people actually do this. Understandably, however, you might feel incongruent about using the qualifier luckily or fortunately for some unpleasant events. Sadly, luckily, happily refer to emotional states, and most emotions are evaluative, dealing with pleasant or unpleasant, positive or negative. These evaluative quantifiers will often be inappropriate for the content of a particular experience. Interestingly, there is a subcategory of qualifiers that can be used for any content or situation, and surprisingly, they never have negative or unpleasant aspects. Curiously, they all describe a state of learning or attention. Interestingly, surprisingly, curiously, in the previous two sentences are examples. Something unpleasant can be just as interesting as something pleasant because the state of interest or fascination itself is always positive or enjoyable. You probably never heard anyone complain about being curious. Oh, I had this awful curiosity last night. It was terrible. Since this group of cognitive quantifiers never has negative states associated with them, they are truly universal resources which can be used with any experience whatsoever. As a simple proof of this, think of the range of topics that scientists are fascinated by. Some are nice and clean, like optics or subatomic particle physics, but others study aspects of physiological waste, decay, and disease that most people would find utterly disgusting and revolting. Even those can be fascinating and interesting if somebody is learning about them. Fortunately, there is another great benefit from using this kind of qualifier that goes beyond enjoying a more positive state. It is also a useful and effective state to use in beginning to understand, process, and solve any problem or difficulty. An attitude of interest or fascination is an excellent positive resource state for learning to change because it redirects attention from the evaluation of the problem to interest and curiosity about the problem, about how the problem works. A shift to a more specific logical level of categorization. When you understand the structure of a problem, often a path to a solution becomes clear. And I'm going to stop here for this and